Imagine the sheer psychological terror of being locked in maximum security doom, staring down absolute zero chance of survival. In these moments, most people process the finality and stop fighting. But occasionally, a person refuses to acknowledge the system's logic and starts hunting for the cracks. The most successful escapes are essentially high-stakes engineering projects. By mapping specific constraints and turning mundane items into leverage, prisoners can slowly counterbalance the weight of the institution. Surviving impossible odds requires a captive to look at the rigid rules of their reality, reject them entirely, and find ways to manipulate the physics of their confinement. In 1809, frontiersmen John Coulter and John Potts were paddling up the Jefferson River in Montana hunting for beaver pelts when hundreds of Blackfeet warriors suddenly emerged from the forest. Potts is violently hacked to pieces, and Coulter is stripped entirely naked, given a brief head start in a human hunt. Coulter leaned into the physiological limits of the human body. He sprinted across the prairie until his nose bled, then used the geometry of the chase to kill the fastest warrior pursuing him with the man's own broken spear. Reaching the river, he utilized a unique environmental pocket. He dove into the freezing water and hid inside the dark cavity of a beaver lodge, waiting in total silence while his hunters searched the surface right above him. He waited for nightfall, swam downstream, and somehow survived a 300-mile trek over 11 days with nothing but a stolen blanket to protect him from the elements. When stripped of all external tools, raw human biology and the instinct to live become the final mechanisms for bypassing a physical trap. In 1865, a Lumbee Native American named Henri Lowry attempted to disband his outlaw gang and start a peaceful life in the post-Civil War South. The local plantation owners he used to rob had him arrested at his own wedding, locking him in an iron cell to face a certain execution. Since a man cannot run through iron bars, Lowry looked toward a link that reached outside the prison walls: his brand new wife. She refused to let his sentence stand, orchestrating a plan to smuggle tools and coordinate a jailbreak that effectively neutralized the physical cage from the outside in. Realizing that a peaceful life was no longer an option, Lowry reformed his gang and launched a campaign of targeted revenge against the local elites. By 1962, Alcatraz functioned as a perfectly systematized cage, an isolated fortress surrounded by the freezing, lethal currents of San Francisco Bay. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers had no wilderness to run through and no outside network to call upon. They were trapped in a facility designed to leave zero room for error. Their path out relied on a slow, methodical hack of the prison's own overlooked inventory, combined with months of extreme patience. Using spoons, they chipped concrete around cell vents for months. To manage visual checks, they made realistic papier-mâché dummy heads, convincing authorities they were asleep. Finally, they climbed utility pipes to the roof and crossed the bay on a raft glued from 50 stolen raincoats. Even the most secure systems fail when met with a person who treats every constraint as a problem to be solved rather than a finality. Coulter survived the wild, Lowry dismantled the authorities, and the Alcatraz escapees vanished into the fog, leaving behind a prison that could no longer claim to be inescapable. The history of the Great Escape proves that physical walls only function as long as the mind inside accepts the limitations imposed on them. These stories suggest there is no such thing as an impossible trap, only a system that hasn't yet met someone willing to ignore its rules. If stories, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know down in the comments what crazy historical events you want us to cover next. See you in the next one.